Operation Southeast Croatia was a large-scale German-led counter-insurgency operation conducted in the southeastern parts of the independent state of Croatia. During World War II, it was the first of two German-led operations targeting mainly Yugoslav partisans in eastern Bosnia between the 15th of January and the 4th of February 1942. Several days after the conclusion of Operation Southeast Croatia, a follow-up operation known as Operation Ozren was carried out between the Bosnia and Spreča rivers. Both operations also involved Croatian Home Guard and Italian troops and are associated with what is known as the Second Enemy Offensive in Yugoslav historiography. The insurgents in the area of operations included some groups led by communist partisans and some led by Serb chauvinist Chetniks. Although the partisans and Chetniks had already irrevocably split in the territory of the military commander in Serbia following Operation Ozren, this had not yet happened in eastern Bosnia, and in some areas they were still cooperating. As a result, differentiating between the rank and file of the two groups was difficult, as even the communist-led insurgent groups consisted mainly of Serb peasants who had little understanding of the political aims of the leaders. While there were 20,000 Chetnik-led insurgents located within the area of operations, they offered no resistance to the German NDH forces, and many withdrew east across the Drina River to avoid being engaged. This contributed to the complete unraveling of Chetnik partisan cooperation in eastern Bosnia. The partisan main force was able to evade the Germans, infiltrate through the Italian cordon to the south and establish itself around Foča. The failure of the Axis forces to decisively engage the partisans during these operations necessitated a further major offensive, Operation Trio, in the area immediately south of where Operations Southeast Croatia and Ozren had taken place. Background: on the 6th of April 1941, the Axis powers invaded Yugoslavia from multiple directions, rapidly overwhelming the underprepared Royal Yugoslav Army, which capitulated 11 days later. In the aftermath of the invasion, Yugoslavia was partitioned between the Axis powers through a combination of annexations and occupation zones. Outside of these areas, an Axis puppet state known as the Independent State of Croatia was established on the territory of modern-day Croatia and Bosnia and Herzegovina. The NDH was divided by a German-Italian demarcation line, known as the Vienna Line, with the Germans occupying the north and northeastern parts of the NDH, and the Italians the south and southwestern sections. The NDH immediately implemented genocidal policies against the Serb, Jewish and Romani population. Armed resistance to the occupation and the NDH initially formed into two loosely cooperating factions, the partisans, who were led by communists, and the Chetniks, who were mostly led by Serb chauvinist officers of the defeated Yugoslav army. In November and December 1941, almost all partisan forces from the territory of the military commander in Serbia had been forced to withdraw into eastern Bosnia, where they combined with local partisan forces. Most of the Chetnik forces in eastern Bosnia were local Serb peasants. The insurgency in eastern Bosnia meant that NDH authorities were unable to retain control of the region. At the end of 1941, there were 6 partisan detachments in eastern Bosnia, with about 7,300 fighters operating in the Majevica, Ozren, Birac, Romanija, Zavijezda and Klinovic areas. According to en.wikipedia, in early January 1942, the Chetniks controlled a large portion of eastern Bosnia, including the towns of Zvornik, Visegrad, Vlasenica, Srebrenica, Drinjaka, Bratunik, Foča, Ustiklina, Gorazda and Kajnis. Due to continuing cooperation between the two groups, the Chetniks also shared control of the towns of Rogodica, Oliver and Han Pijasak with the partisans. Planning. The orders from General der Artillerie Paul Bader, the German military commander in Serbia, directed that Operation Southeast Croatia was to be an encirclement operation. All persons encountered within the area of operations were to be treated as the enemy. The population within the area to be targeted by the operation were almost all either Orthodox Serbs or Bosnian Muslims, although there was a small Catholic Croat minority. Bader believed that the partisans and Chetniks were using the area as winter quarters, and that the presence there was a threat to major transport routes through eastern Bosnia. The operation itself was led by the German 342nd Infantry Division, which had been relieved of its occupation duties in the territory of the military commander in Serbia by Bulgarian troops. The commander of the 342nd Infantry Division, General Major Paul Hoffmann, also had the 718th Infantry Division of General Major Johann Fortner under his command for the duration of the operation. The German force was assisted by Croatian Home Guard units including 7 infantry battalions and 9 artillery batteries. The Axis and Allied NDH forces available for the operation were 30,000–35,000 troops in total. Luftwaffe support included reconnaissance aircraft and a combat squadron. The offensive targeted areas held by the Romanicha, Zavijezda, Birak, and Ozren partisan detachments between Sarajevo, Tuzla, Zvornik and Visegrad, to the south along the Vienna line, separating the German-occupied zone of the NDH from the Italian-occupied zone. The Italians placed a cordon. In total, the area targeted by the operation was estimated by the Germans to contain around 8,000 partisans and 20,000 Bosnian Chetniks. On the 9th of January 1942, the 718th Infantry Division issued orders to both its regiments that defined the following groups as hostile: all non-residents and residents that had been absent from their localities until recently, all identifiable Chetniks or communists with or without weapons or ammunition, and anyone concealing, supplying or providing information to those groups. Any captured partisans were to be briefly interrogated and summarily shot, as were any other insurgents that had attacked the Germans, been caught carrying ammunition or messages, or who resisted or fled. Also, any houses from which shots were fired, German troops were to be burned. 15 to 18 January Operation Southeast Croatia commenced on the 15th of January 1942. The 342nd Infantry Division approached the area of operations from the Drina Valley to the east, with the 718th Infantry Division striking east from assembly areas in Sarajevo and Tuzla. In the first days of the operation, the 697th Regiment of the 342nd Infantry Division, supported by NDH units, thrust out of the bridgehead over the Drina at Zvornik and cleared a high ground southwest and south of the town, and south along the Drina Valley Road, hindered by roadblocks and destroyed bridges. It then followed up the retreating insurgents, mopping up the Drinjaka Valley, before pushing southwest through the mountains and reaching Vlasianica on the 18th of January. Parts of the 698th Regiment of the 342nd Infantry Division fought southwest from Visegrad along the upper Drina Valley to Madeda, while other elements pushed west towards Rogatka, followed by an Italian Alpini battalion. The 699th Regiment of the 342nd Infantry Division advanced along the Drina Valley past the confluence with the Drinjaka to the area west of Ljubovija, clearing roadblocks as they went. In the area of Milici, they captured about 400 insurgents, mostly Chetniks loyal to Jestimir Danjic, along with a tank, 2 machine guns, about 160 rifles and a large amount of ammunition. The regiment then mopped up the area west of Vlasenica and one battalion cleared the route to Srebrenica. The 738th Regiment of the 718th Infantry Division was reinforced by pioneers, 4 NDH battalions, 4 NDH artillery batteries and 2.5 German mountain gun batteries. It pushed east from Sarajevo along the Praka Valley, then through the Romanija Mountains towards Rogatica. Fighting in very difficult terrain, it captured 240 insurgents and significant amounts of weapons and ammunition. It also freed 10 Italian and 57 NDH soldiers. The other regiment of the 718th Infantry Division, the 750th Regiment, was reinforced by a German artillery battery, an NDH infantry battalion and an NDH mountain battery. It moved south from an assembly area southwest of Tuzla towards Olivo. It reached Kladanj on the 16th of January, and spent the following days clearing both sides of the road west towards Vlasenica. It had been planned that the Italian 3rd Mountain Infantry Division Ravenna would provide a cordon to the south, blocking any southerly withdrawal by the insurgents. This did not occur, as the Italians claimed the railroad near Mostar had been damaged, resulting in several weeks' delay. When the Chetnik leaders appointed by Draza Mihailović, Majors Bosko Todorović and Danjic, became aware of the commencement of Operation Southeast Croatia, they advised other Chetnik commanders that the operation was targeted at the partisans, and there was no need for the Chetniks to get involved. Following this, the units withdrew from the positions on the front line, let their Germans pass through their areas, or went home. Many withdrew across the Drina into the territory of the military commander in Serbia to avoid being engaged, which severely weakened the partisan defenses, with the result that they suffered significant casualties and lost a great deal of territory. These actions severed any remaining cooperative links that remained between the Chetniks and partisans in eastern Bosnia. The insurgents in the area of operations destroyed villages to deny supplies and shelter to the Germans who were operating in mountainous terrain, with snow up to 1 meter deep and facing extreme temperatures approaching -30 degrees Celsius. The partisans proved very difficult to pin down, aided by excellent communication and supported by the local populace. During the operation, the decisive engagements with the partisans were mainly in the Romanija region. The Romanija detachment made up 40% of all partisans in eastern Bosnia and bore the brunt of most of the fighting during the operation. 19 to 23 January, after their initial advances, the 342nd Infantry Division spent the next few days mopping up the areas they had entered. The 697th Regiment advanced south from Vlasenica through the Javor Mountains, meeting little resistance and capturing Han Pijesak on the 22nd of January. Elements of the 697th Regiment pushed west towards Olivo the same day. The 698th Regiment cleared the area around Rogatica, killing 50 and capturing 200 insurgents, and liberating 63 captured Croatian Home Guard soldiers. The 699th Regiment patrolled the area as far as Vlasenica and Srebrenica. These mopping up operations achieved little, as most of the insurgents had escaped the encirclement before it was completed. The 718th Infantry Division was assisted in the subsequent operations by air support from the ZNDH, which bombed Sokolac on the 20th of January. On the 21st of January, the 738th Regiment captured the village of Podromanija south of Sokolac, and on the following day elements of the regiment drove through Sokolac and closed on Han Pijesak. On the same day, the 750th Regiment reached Olivo, but the insurgents had withdrawn from the area. On the 21st of January, Bader dramatically altered his previous orders regarding the treatment of those encountered in the area of operations, directing that those who did not resist and surrendered or merely had weapons in the houses, were to be treated as prisoners of war. It is likely that this change was intended to assist Chetniks in the area of operations to avoid destruction. By the end of January, Bader's chief of staff was attempting to negotiate a cooperation agreement with Danjik, and in turn Danjik ordered the 4,500–10,000 Chetniks under his command to avoid the Germans or surrender the weapons immediately if they were unable to do so. After temporarily improving the partisan defenses against the German and NDH forces, the partisan Supreme Headquarters and the 1st Proletarian Brigade were unable to salvage the situation and retreated south towards Foča. The 1st Proletarian Brigade, less 2 battalions that were accompanying the Supreme Headquarters, crossed the Igman mountain plateau near Sarajevo with temperatures reaching -32°C. According to the commander of the 1st Proletarian Brigade, Koka Popović, 172 partisans suffered severe hypothermic injury and 6 died. When they approached the German-Italian demarcation line south of Sarajevo, the partisans were able to infiltrate through the weak Italian cordon. Montenegrin partisans crossed into the NDH to attack the Chetniks, capturing Foča on the 20th of January and Gorazda on the 22nd of January. The German and NDH forces were successful in recapturing Sokolac, Rogatica, Bratunik, Srebrenica, Vlasenica, Han Pijesak, Olivo, Bosansko Petrovo Selo, and some smaller settlements, and inflicted significant losses on the partisans, because the Chetniks failed to assist the partisans in the battle. The Yugoslav Central Committee ceased all further attempts to cooperate with them and issued a declaration on the 22nd of January to Bosnians, Serbs, Muslims, Croats. The Chetnik leaders Boško Todorović, Akim Babić, and others were traitors. It further proclaimed that the partisans fought alone, all across Bosnia and Herzegovina, and ended with, "Long live the United People's Liberation, struggle of all the peoples of Bosnia." The Romanian detachment's commander, Slavis Avina Sica, was killed in combat against the Germans. A member of the Supreme Headquarters of the partisans, Svetozar Vukmanović Tempo, reported that detachment had completely collapsed. However, faced with overly ambitious objectives and atrocious weather, the combined operation failed to destroy the partisan forces and was called off on the 23rd of January 1942, with the Germans having suffered casualties of 25 dead, 131 wounded, and 1 missing, as well as around 300 cases of frostbite. The NDH forces lost 50 soldiers killed or seriously wounded. The Germans captured 855 rifles, 22 machine guns and 4 artillery pieces, along with livestock and draft animals. The partisans had lost 531 killed and between 1,331 and 1,400 captured, in addition to the frostbite casualties suffered by the 1st Proletarian Brigade while crossing Mount Igman. A total of 168 NDH and 104 Italian troops that had been captured by the partisans were freed during the operation. The Supreme Headquarters entered Foča on the 25th of January and stayed there for 3.5 months. Operation Ozren. Operation Ozren was aimed at clearing an estimated 2,000 partisans from the area between the Bosna and Spreča rivers, and was effectively an extension of Operation Southeast Croatia, employing elements of the force used in that operation. The main force used was Fortness 718th Infantry Division, reinforced by a regiment of the 342nd Infantry Division, supported by a number of NDH units. The force was also supported by 5 tank platoons and an armored train. Around 20,000 Axis troops were committed to the operation. It commenced several days after Operation Southeast Croatia ended on the 23rd of January 1942. The Germans advanced north and west from Kladanj towards the cordon established by 10 Croatian Home Guard battalions supported by their own artillery. The Germans believed they had thoroughly sealed off the area and checked the Croatian cordon every night, but the majority of partisans were able to evade the cordon and escape by breaking up into small groups and infiltrating through the cordon through seemingly impassable terrain. The Germans also believed that some partisans merely withdrew into the mountains, concealing their numbers by walking in each other's snow prints, in order to return to the valleys when the Axis forces left. The operation concluded on the 4th of February 1942. Aftermath. Both operations were hampered by the German need to rely on their Croatian allies as well as the fact that both forces were ill-equipped for operations in mountainous terrain during extreme winter conditions. The Croatian units had proven not to be a useful addition to the operation as they possessed little in the way of fighting power, had little unit cohesion and suffered from serious supply problems. Operation Southeast Croatia and Ozren were early opportunities for the Germans to learn lessons about the challenges the poorly equipped and often substandard occupation troops faced fighting in the difficult terrain and weather conditions of Bosnia. However, these lessons were to be repeated many more times in the following years as German commanders persisted with their encirclement tactics and unreasonable expectations of what could be achieved in a given time and space. Following the conclusion of Operation Southeast Croatia and Ozren, German and NDH forces conducted Operation Prijedor in northwest Bosnia. The Germans inflicted considerable losses on the partisans and captured extensive territory and population centers from them. However, they failed to eliminate them as a military factor and shortly afterwards had to undertake Operation Trio in the region immediately south of the area of operations for Operations Southeast Croatia and Ozren.